Warren Buffett isn't merely one of the world's wealthiest people. He is most likely the richest billionaire with the fewest expenses. And he's been like this for a long time. He normally spends $3.17 at McDonald's for breakfast. He'll choose the less expensive choice if the market is down. He still lives in the same old house he bought more than 60 years ago for $31,500. Heck! He has even. At the same time, I used to drive a car with a license plate that stated frugal. Warren Buffett's company paid $6.7 million for a personal jet plane in 1989. He bought a Dale in 1952. The Carnegie speaking course, which proved to be rather costly. If you think at it in terms of opportunity cost, but more on that later. Buffett also spent 6% of his then net worth for a wedding ring in 1952. He even considers his wedding ring purchase to be the best investment he's ever made. I've never regretted purchasing a piece of jewelry. Although Charlie Munger used to refer to the jet plane as the indefensible, it is evident that the Oracle of Omaha believes that an investor must occasionally be willing to pay up even outside of the stock market, which begs the question of how thrifty an investor should be in this video. We will boil the topic of postponed gratification into 3 bite-sized chunks. This is Wealth Stable, and we're here to give you the greatest strategies and tools for achieving financial independence through stock market investing. First and foremost, let's talk about why frugality is so crucial for investors. According to Warren Buffett, investment is renouncing current consumption in order to be able to consume more in the future. Buffett, who understood the wonders of compounding early on, has always thought that every dollar today might be $10 some other day. In Buffett's case, that has proven to be a modest assumption. And when you think about the mathematics of it, expenses snowball really quickly given the stock market returns that Buffett has had over the years. In today's dollars, how much do you estimate that Dale Carnegie course cost him when he was 22? It would now be $291 million if you had invested the money. This is compound interest in its finest or worst form, depending on your perspective. Expecting you and me to have the same type of returns as the Oracle of Omaha may be a bit ambitious. But, if we suppose we can make half of what a young Warren Buffett was able to achieve, what is the potential and cost of buying a car in your 20s? We're not even talking about a showy automobile. I mean, it's practically the cheapest model available at the moment. If you had invested your money instead, you could have bought a far nicer car at the age of 30. I'm 40. You might have acquired an entire house for your money. In cash, yes, and if you had bought that car when you were 50, you would have already achieved financial independence. The first rule of investing for Warren Buffett is to never lose money. His second rule is to remember everything. Overspending, the first rule, is a surefire way to break this rule without even making a stock market blunder. Also, it's a guaranteed way of delaying the date at which you will reach financial freedom. So compound interest and its wonders is the reason why it's a good idea to at least be somewhat frugal. Most investors understand this, and this is why it's almost a bragging right within our circles to talk about your high savings rate. I always believed in spending 2 or 3 cents out of every dollar earned savings, but how frugal should an investor be? What is a reasonable savings rate? 10% of your income, 30% more. This obviously comes down to personal choices, but let me help you too. Analyze your own situation by giving you a few rules of thumb from Warren Buffett. Any money you save before you get out and start having a family is probably where any dollar's probably worth $10 later on, simply because you can save it. It's the time to save these young. The first rule of thumb, which was hinted at before, is that the younger you are, the larger the financial incentive to be frugal. Is one of the main reasons Warren Buffett is the greatest investor in the world is that he began investing when he was 11 years old, and he was able to make and save a lot of money while still in his teens. The best day to start was probably yesterday, but today is the second best day. So do not feel discouraged. Secondly, well, it's a personal choice of how much you value a certain activity. Who's to say whether saving $1 on a trip to Disneyland for your family is a better investment than spending it on something you'll love immensely? So that, you know, when you're 75, you may have a 30-feet boat instead of a 20-feet boat. In the intro of the video, we saw that Buffett spends 6% of his net worth on a wedding ring in 1952 and calls it the best investment of his lifetime, and you know that this man has made a lot of great investments. Moreover, Buffett would never advise you to be frugal or defensive while making purchases that are likely to return substantially more in the future, as he did in 1952 when he spent 1% of his net worth on a Dale Carnegie speaking course. That would have cost $291 million every day. It may be tough to fathom now if he had invested the money, But Warren Buffett used to have a lot of stage fright back when he understood that this would set him back a lot in his pursuit for wealth, so he opted to pay up to help him grow as a person. I'm sure the $100 he paid for the course ranks towards the top of his list of all-time best investments. Finally, you may argue that how thrifty you should be is contingent on where we are in the market cycle. And if you discover that everything is really inexpensive, such as in the year 74, you should invest every possible diamond in stocks. That's exactly what we've attempted. Let's use the current stock market condition as an example. The 3-year average earnings seal of the S&P 500, meaning how much the companies in that index has earned during the last 3 years compared with what they currently cost, is 2.9%. As you can see from this graph, that is lower than at any other time in history. In 2008 and 2009, for example, it was a much greater time for penny pinching for us investors. Why? Because we would have gotten more than 2 times as much earnings from foregoing consumption back then as we get now because of how expensive the stock market currently is. Yes, it is actually relatively more justified. I mean less unjustified to go out there and splurge on a Lamborghini right now than it ever has been. This is not financial advice though, and you should not forget about rule number 1 and rule number 2, I have everything in life I want. It's a really straightforward matter. If there's anything money can't buy for them, it won't, but if there's anything money can buy for me, I'll get it this afternoon. If I may conjecture a little, I believe Buffett's ability to remain modest despite his tremendous wealth stems from 2 factors. His perception of his own self-worth is not generated through a money-consuming activity, and he does not have any expensive hobbies. If you can combine those 2 for yourself, you'll have a much easier time reaching financial freedom. I have kind of accidentally implemented this in my life to spending money on stuff. Doesn't really help me in increasing the reach of this YouTube channel, improving the performance of my portfolio, or adding plates to the barbell. Also, neither YouTube stock market investing nor powerlifting or activities that require a ton of money to practice as a hobby for us investors. $1 today is worth a bunch of dollars in a few years. Save more when you're young and when you're finding great investments in the stock market. However, some activities outside of the market are too valuable to be cheap with. Keep thrifty by attempting to feed your ego without flashing expensive stuff and avoiding expensive hobbies. Cheers, guys.